All right, I think we're live. Thank you for joining us here at Kingdom Portions, here in Kingdom in Context. And this week, we're going to be looking at Genesis 37 through 40. And as you saw the title of the video, it's going to be Joseph and the Day of Atonement. So I guess the question would be, how or why would we name it Joseph and the Day of Atonement pertaining to these particular passages in Genesis? So stick with us, and we're excited to show you because it's a lot of fun. We loved it when we found it because we don't really get an explanation for the Day of Atonement in Leviticus. It's just out of nowhere, just, oh, by the way, the 10th day of the 7th month, do this.
Well, so we assume we know what
you assume,
what it's about.
But there's also atonement sacrifices for the Sabbaths.
Right.
I mean, there's all these other different types of atonement sacrifices. So one day out of the year was kind of a special occasion, and we actually might get some backstory on it. So we're excited. If you're watching on the live stream right now, on the my lovely wife is Lindsay here.
Hey guys.
I'm Sean. I forgot to introduce ourselves.
By the way, Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah,
hello.
Shabbat Shalom.
This is Sean Griffin. I'm Lindsay Griffin.
That's right. She's going to try to...
Hold on. All right, there we go.
She's going to try to monitor the chat as we talk tonight, as best she can, but interact at the same time. Your voice is not 100% yet. We've both been sick the last week. So just bear with us. We thank you for your patience.
Yeah, excuse the cough drop, but if I don't have it in while we're doing this, I might end up coughing the whole time. So I wouldn't normally, have a cough drop in my mouth when we're filming, but I don't have a choice right now.
Yeah. So, Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Thanks for joining us, guys. This particular episode, because of the things that we discuss from the scriptures in this episode, we just wanted to say there's kind of a mature content warning, because there's some things in here that, maybe PG-13, obviously no vulgar language or anything like that, but just some of the nature of the conversation about some of the subjects that are brought up during this, that we just want to let people know that if you've got really little ones in the room, just, be aware that questions may come. We obviously... this is a family-friendly show. We obviously layer all of our language with, the appropriate speech to discuss mature topics without being obscene or vulgar. So we just want to let you know this particular episode, there's some things we got to talk about, that's in the scriptures.
Well, I think anyone who's familiar with the Torah knows that there's some adult themes in the Torah. And we just realized as we were doing our study that we should probably say at the beginning of every episode, this is a Torah study. There might be some adult themes, some spicy details that, maybe the kids aren't ready to learn about yet. So we just want to start giving people that fair warning that, some of the Torah studies can, be a little PG-13, as Sean put it, maybe even rated R sometimes.
Okay. So also, just as always, guys, if you're blessed by what we do, in the links below in the video here on YouTube, there's information for both PayPal and Patreon. I know a lot of people sometimes struggle with Patreon for some reason. It's just basically like a social media site. You got to set up your own account and all that. But if it's easier for you and you've been blessed by something that you've received on this channel, on this ministry, you can just use the PayPal information. That's what a lot of people do. So we're really grateful for everyone that already has contributed to us and who want to see us do this full time through PayPal and through Patreon. We love you guys. We appreciate the support. And we love to get to a place where, we can do this all the time.
Yeah.
And so a live stream wouldn't be that big of a deal for us. But but right now we're both work full-time jobs and do this on the side. So we love you. We appreciate you. And as always, anything that you may feel inclined by the Father because you're blessed with this ministry that you would want to give to us, it's not a tithe. We're not Levites. Legally, according to, the scriptures themselves, all it would just simply, as Jesus explained in Matthew 10, where he sent his disciples out and said, preach the gospel of the kingdom of God, and don't take any money with you because people will give to you out of your generosity, basically, if the message that you have is blessing them. So that's all. That's kind of the principle we follow.
Yeah.
Right. All right. This week, Genesis 37 through 40. We're going to be looking at some wonderful pairings from First Chronicles, Corinthians, Jubilees. Obviously Jubilees is the easy go-to because it is, the storylines are paralleling what Genesis through Deuteronomy is talking about, mostly Genesis, really.
Yeah.
And then also Sirach, out of nowhere, Ecclesiasticus, just sneaking in there with some relevant information for this portion. So we're excited to bring it to you. Ask any questions that you have. Like I said, we're going to do our best to monitor the chat, but we can't promise to get to every question. All right. And because your voice is not doing too well this week, and I've just now got mine back, I think I'm going to probably start reading first. And so let me see. We'll put these on the screen for everyone to enjoy. Just 1 second here, since that is not letting me. All right. Okay, folks. So Genesis 37. It says, now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a varicolored tunic. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, please listen to this dream which I have had, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us, or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Now he had still another dream, and related it to his brothers, and said, lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. He related it to his father, to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Then his brothers went to pasture their flock. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said to him, I will go. And then he said to him, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. A man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, what are you looking for? He said, I am looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock. Then the man said, they have moved from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to him, here comes this dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we will say, a wild beast devoured him. Then let us see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let us not take his life. Reuben further said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and do not lay hands on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. So it came about, when Joseph reached his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the varied-colored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty, without any water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. And as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh, on their way to bring them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother and our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. And then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go? So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat, dipped the tunic in his blood, and they sent the varied-colored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not. And then he examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph had surely been torn to pieces. So Joseph tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loin and mourned for his son many days. Then all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. And meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. Okay, so this here is, there's a lot of fun stuff in there, sweetie. There really is.
I think you might still be sharing.
It takes just a minute. There's a delay from the live stream from what we see to what the people see.
Okay.
It's just the way it works. So, but yeah, that's okay. Any thoughts on 37?
Well, I had an interesting thing that I noticed when we were reading this from our actual physical Bible. I noticed there was a little annotation next to that word "very colored" in reference to Joseph's tunic. And the annotation said that it actually could also just mean a robe that is basically long sleeve and goes all the way to the ankles. So I looked up the word, and it's interesting because very colored, a multicolored item isn't the first thing on the definitions for that word, the word that's used for that. So I just thought it was interesting that maybe all this time we've been talking about a very colored tunic. And I mean, maybe it wasn't that it was, a bunch of colors that made it special. Maybe what made it special was that his father made it for him specifically. But I mean, I don't think it's really all that significant. I just thought it was a neat little annotation in my Bible I had never noticed before that, well, maybe it wasn't all that colored. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Whatever it was, whether it stood out because of its color or not, it definitely stood out in some regard because obviously the text brings it up to say he made him a special tunic. And then that's the plot device they actually used to show Jacob, hey, look, Joseph's dead or been mauled by an animal. So I always wondered though, because he looks at it, they slaughtered the goat, put the blood on the tunic, and then brought it to Jacob. And it's like, you just wonder if there was any actual tears in the tunic to look like, an animal had ripped it off of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if it's just completely intact with no tearing, it's just got blood draped on it. That looks suspicious to me.
Yeah.
So maybe they tore it. I don't know. So either way, what's interesting to me though was in the very beginning of the chapter in verse 2, where it says that he had a bad report about the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, right?
Right.
And so we looked those up. That's going to be Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So but yet during and some might think, well, maybe that's because these were the guys that wanted to kill him when he went to check on him in Dothan, right? But then there's Reuben there. Right. He's trying to save him.
Right.
Where's Judah? Where's Levi? Yeah. Because we talked about last week, Levi got the priesthood. He's supposed to be righteous. He's supposed to be doing what's right. Were all the brothers there is the question,
Well, this is the other thing that we found out when we actually went to Jubilees to see if we could figure out what this bad report was. And isn't there actually a whole different time frame going on from the beginning of the chapter where he's out there with those brothers? Yeah. Then later on when he's out with them is at a whole different time. There was like a war between them and the Amorite kings. There's
times of, that's why it says he has a couple dreams in between that time. Yeah. Obviously he had to go to sleep to have the dreams. So there's definitely time passing from the start of the chapter to the end of the chapter. Okay. So, but I'm just saying, I wonder if I've always wondered about this story. And now that I've looked up the actual sons that are being mentioned, that he said he had a bad report about them, but it doesn't explain what the bad report is. And I just wonder if all the brothers are there or not. It's possible they're all there. I don't know. I'm sure they're at different age ranges. I don't know how that works out. But all I do know is that it's, for whatever reason, he had a bad report about 4 of the brothers specifically. Yeah. So maybe they were all there. It's just the others didn't speak up because they were intimidated by the 4 bad brothers, except for Reuben. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But then also verse 36. We talked about the captain of the guard.
Yeah, right? The captain of the guardsmen. So what got us to go look up this word for guardsman, because he's captain of the guardsmen, is we were actually going through Jubilees looking for context, and it called him the chief baker or something like that in Jubilees. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. Is that a contradiction? Is that something Jubilees is saying that Genesis doesn't say? So we went and looked up this word for the guardsman, and it actually is a cook. It's the people who slaughtered the animals, was the butchers. So it's Strong's Hebrew Strong's number 2876, the word tabach, and it is for a cook / guardsman. Yeah. So apparently the term guardsman meant something different than what we would associate it with. We think of like a bodyguard, Right. But kind of, sort of, that would be, in my opinion, like ancient kings of the past, part of their line of defense around their personal bubble. They had to have someone that cooked their food that they trust,
and that would taste their food.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we read later about the cupbearer.
Mm-hmm.
He was entrusted to make sure that juice or wine or whatever's being brought to him was without poison. And so these guys were extremely, which is why we found him in prison, because he made the king mad. I don't know if he spilled wine on him or if he took him some bad stuff that was soured, because he didn't taste it first. I don't know. The point is, they had an entire entourage around them to make sure that there was safety in all regards, because, assassinations happen. Yeah. And that's just been the way of the world for a long time. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating that, the word cook actually is Strong's number 2876, and it means guardsman. Yeah. So
and Jubilees was not saying something different from Genesis.
Yeah, they both lined up. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing. Now, for I guess for those who are interested about what the next chapter. Well, let's just read the next chapter and we'll get to it in just a minute.
Yeah, we can tell them afterwards.
All right, guys. Let me pull these slides back up for y'all to follow along if you'd like. All right, so we'll start in Genesis 38. And it says, "And it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite, whose name was Herah. Judah saw that there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her, and he went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he named him And then she conceived again and bore a son and named him Onan. She bore still another son and named him Shelah, and it was at Shezib that she bore him. Now Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Onan, Go into your brother's wife, perform your duty as a brother-in-law to her, raise up offspring for your brother. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so when he went into his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground in order to not give offspring to his brother. But what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, so he took his life also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought, I'm afraid that he too may die like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in her father's house. And now after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went out to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Herah the Adulamites. It was told to Tamar, Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. And when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, Here now, let me come in to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me that you may come in to me? And he said, Therefore, I will send you a young goat from the flock. And she said, Moreover, will you give a pledge until you send it? He said, What pledge shall I give you? And she said, Your seal, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and departed, and removed her veil and put on her widow's garments. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the man of her place, saying, Where is the temple prostitute who was by the road at Enaim? But they said, There has been no temple prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I did not find her. And furthermore, the men of the place said, There has been no temple prostitute here. And then Judah said, Let her keep them, otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her. Now, it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she is also a child by harlotry. And then Judah said, Bring her out, let her be burned. It was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law, saying, I am with child by the man to whom these things belong. And she said, Please examine and see whose signet ring and cords and staff these are. Judah recognized them and said, She is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not have relations with her again. It came about at that time she was giving birth, that behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread in his hand, saying, This one came out first. But it came about as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And then she said, What a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Perez. And afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread in his hand. He was named Zerah. All right. So
Spicy.
There's a lot going on in this chapter, guys. There's so much. Let's see here. Basically, one of the things that it blows my mind how these things go down. But one of the things I think is probably a good clue for us, that at the beginning of this particular chapter, it tells us who Judah actually married.
Mm-hmm.
He married a Canaanite woman.
Yes.
Huge no-no.
Serious no-no.
Like we just went through Esau the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And him doing that and all the problems and how it was a strict command that, Isaac was trying to pass on to them. And Rebecca reinforced, Abraham reinforced, do not marry the Canaanites.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like just stick to the peoples that are in this family, and it's, oh man. And so he took a wife from a Canaanite named Shua. And I think we see her name later, named Bathshua.
Right.
Which is basically the Hebrew word meaning the daughter of Shua.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting. So pretty easy the way they do that. But ultimately, there's some unique things here because what happens with, we got the whole and Onan, right? Let's keep in mind that these guys are the daughter of Shua, or they're the sons of Bathshua, right? This Canaanite woman, right? And they are, in my opinion, kind of acting like we've seen in past episodes. These Canaanites, like last week, the men of Shechem were acting towards the Israelites, right? So we had Onan displeased the Lord, displeased the Lord. We don't really get any of what he actually did in Genesis, nor in Jubilees, but Jasher has something to say about it. We get it tells us what he did. Right. Okay, he just used the girl. He didn't intend to take care of her or provide family for her. So we've got some very bad behavior by these two guys. But it's not just that they're not wanting, because remember there's that law that we read. Remember we're doing our Deuteronomy portions. We read about that law that if the brother-in-law does not fulfill the duty and the obligation to, like if the brother dies and the brother-in-law has to take over basically and provide children for the wife and then essentially kind of adopt them into his family. And so
except those children take the brother's name. That's why it's saying Onan knew those children wouldn't be his.
Yeah, because the guy that died.
Excuse
I think
me,
we're
guys.
gonna make it, guys. I think so.
I'm sorry.
The guy that died, the children would have taken his name and not Onan's name. Okay, so that's the distinction there, and that's why Onan's saying they're not going to be mine. I don't want to do this. He's being weird about it, right? Which, according to the Torah later, he's going to be given a label. The man who, they're going to give him one sandal. The lady gets to walk up to him and spit in his face and give him the house of one sandal or something like that. It's kind of funny.
I thought she threw the sandal at him.
I think she either spits on him or throws the sandal at him.
I think
or
it's both. I think she throws the sandal at him and spits on him, and then forever he's known as the man who was hit with a shoe or something like that.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I want to say funny, but I don't want to seem disrespectful to the Father's word.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's a unique concept of what was expected of the family to take care of family.
Right.
This guy's not doing it. He gets killed for it. So now we've got, out of 3 Canaanite half-breed boys, we've got 2 of them that are dead because they refuse to follow God's instructions. Yeah. Okay. And then you've got Shelah and Judah just says right off the bat, I'm afraid he's going to die too.
Yeah.
So to me, it makes me think that he knew Shelah wasn't doing what's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So keep that in mind as we're about to say what we're next about to say. Okay. What happens after his wife dies? Bathshua, the wife of Judah, dies. And then it says what? He goes to another town.
Yeah.
And he does what? He sees someone he thinks is a harlot. And he's like, hey, let's take her.
Yeah.
Let me go play with her for a little minute. So we got a problem here, right? And it makes me think, and this is not in the text. This is just understanding the Canaanite practices, understanding their disposition toward the Hebrews, specifically the family of Abraham, and then seeing some of the behavior we're seeing from his boys and from the wife. We're actually going to read about that a little later in Jubilees about actually how Bathshua refused to give Shelah to Tamar.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why Tamar says that, why she was even motivated to go dress up and trap Judah like this, because they weren't going to give Shelah to her.
Right. Now, we should probably explain that Tamar was legally bound to stay within that family through the Torah law. We found out Tamar comes from the line of Eber, right?
That's right.
So she was a Hebrew.
She's the daughter of Aram.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she, we would assume she was at least trained in some semblance of Torah, some semblance of righteousness. So she was not going outside of any legal bounds when she did this. And she did this because she was stuck. Because once you're promised to someone under the Torah law, even if you're just engaged, she's his daughter-in-law. And then the law, I think we made a note of, it's Deuteronomy 25 verses 5-6.
Mm-hmm.
That law states that she can't marry outside of the family if that husband dies. And that's where the brothers come in and providing the heir and that kind of stuff. So some people might think, why would she have gone out and gone to that extreme?
Yeah, she's stuck in a situation by not just the cultural tradition, but the instructions that were being passed down from Jacob and to his boys because remember, as we talked about last week, Jacob had received the instructions of God of, how to live. Even to the point where now someone asked a great question. I'm going to stop real quick, guys, because someone asked a great question. I think it was maybe last week. I wasn't able to actually get to it and respond because we love everybody participating. We really appreciate you asking questions. We try to get to as many as we can. Sometimes we just don't have the time, or at least I don't have all the time in the world to answer every single question. And as the channel grows, that problem, unfortunately, is only becoming worse. So I apologize. We're doing our best, but there's some questions that if we've already answered in the video, I may not respond. It's not because I'm trying to be rude or ignore you. It's just because I've already answered it in the video, and it's literally recorded me saying it. So it's just some people don't watch all the video before they start asking questions.
We both work full-time jobs. I have a job where I'm in jewelry production. And so I kind of have a little bit more freedom to glance at my phone, go take a bathroom break, respond to people here and there. Sean's job is mainly driving, so it's not safe to be obviously texting and driving. And then we do the ministry, and I have my own jewelry that I make pretty much every waking hour that I'm not at my other job making someone else's jewelry. So just please be patient with us, and please understand. We see every comment, we see every question. We just don't necessarily have the time to safely respond.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't have the time. And editing these videos that come up on the channel,
lot of time.
It's like in the future, I just have to hire a full-time editor. If you can afford it, because just someone that because it takes like the hour and a half that we can record may take 5 to 6 hours of editing and uploading. And so now look at how many videos come out every week, and you can start seeing how much time goes into something like this. So
have mercy on us.
We're trying to get your questions, but someone asked a great question last week, I think, and they were asking, was the law, and this is someone that clearly was still coming out of a dispensation mindset. And they were asking, was the law was the full law given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Right. And we'd actually talked about several weeks ago in one of our portions we did over Deuteronomy, we talked about how Jubilees 34, I think it was, the angels explained to Moses on Mount Sinai what goes down with Bilhah and Reuben.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this was actually in our episode, I think we titled it Illegitimate Births, 144,000 of Revelation, and a Woman's Happiness. Is episode 6. So we're on episode 20 right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was so if we want to go look, and it was about the hour and 10-minute mark was where we discussed this concept. But the whole idea was the angel was telling Moses on Mount Sinai, as he's explaining the story of Reuben and Bilhah, that, hey, by the way, there's some, we didn't give you guys the fullness of the law for a reason. So we got a lot of the law, right, which is the moral codes and things like that. But clearly, without having a Levitical priesthood and instructions for a tabernacle, all those extra laws we get in Leviticus and Exodus and all that stuff, they didn't get those yet because the circumstances weren't right for them to need them, right? So they were still depending upon a Melchizedek order. They were still doing an altar of unhewn stone through the priesthood that was out in the open, right? They would make an encampment going up to an altar they built with stones. So there wasn't an established tabernacle. There wasn't all the instructions for that, much less an established Levitical priesthood with lesser priests and a high priest. There was a Melchizedek priesthood, which in my opinion had high priests and lesser priests, but there was not all these detailed ordinances for what we get in Exodus and all that because the circumstances were not there yet. Doesn't mean that the law was not alive.
Right. Doesn't mean it wasn't written on heavenly tablets already up there, just waiting to be revealed.
That's what we see continually in the book of Jubilees is the angel explaining to Moses This law has been kept from creation in the heavenly tabernacle, or on the heavenly tablets in heaven. Because remember, the tabernacle and the fullness of the law that was received at Mount Sinai, all of that was to do with a tabernacle on the ground, which was just a copy and a shadow of the actual true tabernacle in heaven. And the book of Hebrews, I believe it's chapter 5, verses 4 and 5, explain that in great detail. We also see it in Exodus 25, 26, and 27. As Moses is on Mount Sinai getting the instructions, they're telling him, be careful to make everything you see that you're seeing, make a copy of it, write it down carefully, draw out the schematics carefully so that you can make a copy of what you're seeing on the ground from what is in heaven. Therefore, they've kept the fullness of all the instructions in heaven, down on the ground. Abraham couldn't keep all those because the tabernacle he didn't know about it. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's why we talked about last week, once Jacob got the kind of the prophetic information that there was going to be a temple and a tabernacle there, he wanted to build it.
Yeah, he wanted to get right to it.
Yeah. And the father was like, no, you're not going to be the one. And just keep doing things. I got you. But so we hope that explains the idea. And this is also, if there's no law given forward to mankind, this is what the angel was explaining, that there's no accountability that they can hold you to.
This is why Reuben and Bilhah were not burned for what they did. And we go over it in detail in episode 6. We talk about why would Reuben be saved from that. I mean, I think the logical conclusion for anyone should be he's one of the 12 sons, and people need to come from him. So I think it's kind of obvious why that would be, but we go over it in detail in episode 6.
Yeah, so check that episode out if you have a chance, if you want more detailed information on that particular story. But as it pertains to all of this that we've been reading for the last few episodes, as we see these guys doing actions of the law that we can line up with Deuteronomy, Numbers, Leviticus, Exodus, and we're going, man, did they have the fullness of the law?
Right.
And then you start to realize, well, I don't know, did they do this or that? Why is Tamar sticking into the house? Oh, that's in Deuteronomy 25.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so you start to see this kind of stuff, right? Just like Exodus tells him not to marry Canaanite. Well, you got Abraham instructing his kids not to marry Canaanite.
Yeah.
So they clearly had a huge portion of it, of understanding about the kingdom to come and why they would follow these rules. But as far as the detailed ordinances, the circumstances weren't right yet. So therefore, it didn't matter to them to have it. Furthermore, what I wanted to really throw out here was the concept of why Judah would even mess with Tamar. If she's dressed up like a harlot, intentionally to deceive somebody, to look like a harlot and whatever that looked like, because said she took off her widow's garments, which means that apparently is a distinguishable outfit. To put on a different outfit that was distinguishable to be recognized mistakenly.
Not just a harlot, but a temple prostitute.
But it's a temple prostitute, okay? So now we have Judah, who married a woman from a different religion.
Yeah, we got unequal yoking going on here, guys. And then look at how it trickles down into the family. Because, I mean, clearly Judah was not wearing the spiritual pants in the family. Yeah. Clearly the wife had enough, influence over the children that it's to the point where both the older ones are killed because they would not follow the law. Yeah, had their respective offenses towards the father. And then he is even worried that his youngest son is going to end up with the same fate. We have Jubilees telling us that his wife wouldn't allow her son to marry this girl. And most likely it was because Tamar was a Hebrew. There was an ancient animosity apparently between the Canaanites and the Hebrews, which if we go back to, Canaan settling in that land against his inheritance, against the actual wishes of his forefathers, it would make sense where that ancient hate between them comes from. Yeah. But, then you have, we can see a perfect example in Judah's family as to why it's not a good idea to marry the Canaanites, because that influence onto the rest of the family, that's going to really hinder that family from, actually walking in the ways of the father.
That's right. Yeah. It's one of those deals where you got to wonder what's being like. My thought comes like, where's Levi in all this? Like he marries a Canaanite woman long enough to have kids. There's clearly a generation.
Levi married a Canaanite woman.
Judah married a Canaanite woman long enough to have 3 kids by her, to the point of saying these kids are at the age of reproduction. to be a husband to other people, right? So this isn't just like a quick, short-sighted decision that
right.
You know what I mean? Like, what's Jacob saying during all this to Judah? Like, why you marry her? Like, what's going on? How would you? So clearly, you have Israel, Jacob, letting his children decide for themselves. Do you want to follow the Lord or not?
Yeah. And
at that point in his life, he was like, "Hey, I like this girl. I want to marry this girl." Well, okay, she worships a totally different God. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, how's that going to work out? Now, we're not talking about, guys, and we know that nobody, when we talk about unequally yoking, we know that no one, very, very, very few husbands and wives are just at the same level of understanding in the scriptures or in devotion to their heart and the Father. But like most of the time, they both at least acknowledge God, believe in God, and want to do what's right according to, God's instructions to some degree. So we're looking at a situation where we've got Judah, a son of Jacob, marrying someone that doesn't seem to want to have anything to do with the father's instructions, right? Which is a big deal, which means they're not doing covenant behavior.
Right.
And this is why 2 of his kids are already dead, right? They're refusing to do covenant behavior. And they're in a family that's trying to be in covenant.
Right.
Judah as the leader of that family, which I'm guessing he's circumcised or in Onan. You know what I'm saying? So this all to the point of your heart matters. What you do matters as far as, are you doing the deeds of the covenant? The Father, he sees our hearts. And it makes me wonder if Judah is being influenced by this family, because as soon as she dies, he goes and messes with a temple prostitute. Temple that we saw in previous chapters is a Molech temple.
Yeah.
So, without going into too graphic detail, the point of the temple prostitutes, they had both male and female prostitutes at these temples. And this was part of your quote unquote worship that you would do. And then the offspring that were produced from what we saw in this thing, they would have been the ones they sacrificed later. That was part of the thing. The next year, they take those babies that were conceived in the previous year, and those would be from the temple prostitutes, and those would be the ones they would sacrifice to Moloch. Like, it was a horrible thing. It was not good. So,
I just want to address something in the chat here.
Okay. What's up?
We're not teaching truth for profit. We're not asking to make a profit off of what we're doing. It is completely normal for people to give free will offerings to ministries that they feel fed by, so that those ministries can keep feeding them. It's perfectly normal. It's in the New Testament. It's all through the whole book. We are not teaching truth for profit. And I really don't appreciate the accusation. And I love you. And you don't have to pay anything to watch this. Nobody has to give any money against their will.
All of the content we produce is 100% free.
Yeah.
So you guys can like, share it, subscribe, unsubscribe. I mean, it's all free for you to look at.
Some people offer money out of the goodness of their heart. They have asked us to give them an avenue to do that for us. And those people understand how that works. And it's on their Father has gifted them with the gift of giving. And they choose to do that. And we choose to accept the gift. But we don't demand any gifts. And we would do this whether we received offerings or not. We've been doing it all year. So I'm sorry, but I had to address that.
It's good. No matter what we do, Spade, there's always going to be someone that tries to stir the pot.
I know,
okay? We just want to let it fly.
I took the opportunity to go ahead and answer the question the lady kindly asked. You weren't rude asking that, but that's my explanation for you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because you get like, there's people online that just film themselves playing video games.
Yes.
And they're receiving like hundreds of dollars a day from people that are donating to them just to watch them play video games.
Yeah.
So, again, the scriptural principles, 2 Corinthians 9, Matthew chapter 10, is this idea of those who preach the gospel of the kingdom of God have the right to earn a living off the gospel of the kingdom of God. So this is scriptural principles. We give them at the beginning of every show. We'll just let you read the book for yourself and come to your own peace about that. If you're not at peace with it, that's fine. But ultimately, we do this out of the goodness of our heart. We do this for spend ridiculous amount of extra time in our life, sacrificing other things so that we can provide resources for folks so they can have understanding. That was our whole heart to begin with when we started this. Was we saw nothing but mass confusion across the body from all kinds of people that were either in the church, the mainstream churches, or still coming out of it into more of a messianic feel, but then they were seeing all these different opinions from different messianic teachers. And we were like, well, how can we create something, a channel, a vision, a goal that touches on the major themes and topics of keeping the kingdom of God in focus, which is what Jesus did with all of his preaching, so that we can bring edification and understanding to the average person so they can read the book for themselves and feel like they can read the book,
Right.
and not need some guru to teach them how to read the book, right? Which is why we take all the extra time to put these slides up and, and put them on the screen for you so that you can read along with us as we're doing this. So that's our heart about all this, is we really want people to understand the scriptures so they can then teach them to others on their own.
Yeah.
If you want to link a video to something we've done, awesome. That's cool. We really appreciate the nod and we respect you for that. But at the same time, our goal is to teach you these ideas so that you can go and teach them to other people and competently with the scriptures in hand. And you don't need to say, oh, well, check out this one pastor that says this, or this one teacher that says that. That's where we get in trouble, because then you're pointing to a guy's interpretation instead of competently being able to explain the word yourself. And that is our heart and our passion for everyone that's watching anything on this channel, which is why we do certain things on this channel the way we do, and we take such great care and time to do it. So, all right, guys, let's get back to it.
Moving on.
So basically here in Genesis 38, we've got, basically a lot of things happening here with Judah and Tamar that are going wrong. I mean, clearly Judah acknowledges at the end of the chapter that Tamar was more righteous than him, even in her deception to entrap him. I think this could have been, a pretty huge turning point for him in his life, that he just basically says, and I think we're going to read about that later. So stick with this to our portions, because later, our parents. Our parents.
Is that what we paired?
I believe in Jubilees 34 for later.
Okay.
I think we might be reading about it, but it's going to talk about how Judah's heart did have a change.
No, it's not in 34. It's in 41.
Oh, 41.
So we don't go over that in our pairing. So
if you want to read that on your own.
Read Jubilees chapter 41. It does. He did feel sorry for what he did. He repented. He sought forgiveness, and he was forgiven for that. So the Genesis reading makes it seem like he's pretty,
just like, oh, well,
I'm caught. She's more righteous than I. Don't burn her.
Yeah.
What I really wonder about is the life of those twins after that, and did he raise them, or were they raised in the household of her father? Like that's an interesting.
Tamar was still in his household, so Judah would have raised him.
That's interesting. I mean, that would just definitely make for an interesting, biblical fiction novel.
Think about the irony of that, how all this time, for apparently a span of time waiting for Shelah to grow up.
Right.
She's looking at Judah going, now you're going to give me a husband, right?
Yeah.
You're going to give me a husband, right? And he's like, yeah, I got you. Lo and behold, she makes him the husband.
Yeah, because we never find out what happens with Shelah. Like, did he end up dying? We know that the mother was not allowing him to marry Tamar, but then the mother dies. So
what's so uniquely appropriate for us, and the reason why we're spending some time building up to this on chapter 38 is because Judah, guess where the line of Yeshua comes from?
Right. Yeah.
Can't come from Bathsheba, the Canaanite woman.
Right.
So those people are taken out of the equation. And then Tamar from the daughters of Aram, which is where Abraham came from. And that family line.
She's kosher.
She's
that's not a biblical term, but
Oh, yes. She's basically
Hebrew approved.
She's definitely in the right family, so to speak. She didn't. So Yeshua is not born from any ancient ancestors of Canaanites,
right?
And therefore it helps fulfill all prophecy, and that's wonderful. So I think unless you have anything else in Jubilees 38,
no, we probably spent enough
Genesis
time on
38?
that one.
Okay, we'll go and we'll jump into chapter 39, and let me allow everyone to follow along with us. All right, so Genesis 39, it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had owned he put in his charge. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned, in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. It came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great evil and sin against God?" As she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now, it happened one day that when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household were there inside, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. And when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and he had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us. He came in to lie with me, and I screamed. And when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us, came in to me to make sport of me. And as I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made him prosper. All right, so I think that's all for that chapter. So basically, this lady's crazy.
Yeah, with all the recent, theater in Congress and the Supreme Court and all that stuff recently, I think a lot of people brought to mind this story. Like a lot of us, it was what I immediately thought of as, the whole fiasco with Joseph and Potiphar's wife.
Imagine a woman that just pesters you day after day and saying, "Lie with me. Lie with me." You remember last week, I think it was, or a few weeks ago, where we talked about how was it Jacob when he saw Rachel?
Yeah.
He wept and he kissed her,
yeah.
and he was like, and we were like, "Man, that's a little bit too much. That's some red flags right there." But yeah, so Potiphar's wife, we don't get her name in Genesis here, but she's definitely trouble. Mm-hmm. And what I think is unique about it is that it says that Potiphar was a eunuch.
Yes, that is something I did not notice until we were studying this week. Yes. Potiphar was a eunuch.
He's a eunuch, so that may
which doesn't excuse her behavior.
Does not, but it may be why she was so
crazed.
Yeah,
let's just use that term.
Yeah, she was a little bent up. So I think, and apparently this Joseph is blossoming into a young man. He's become attractive.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson to take from the story, though, here is that we have Joseph clearly obeying Torah command.
That's right.
Of not committing adultery. And the way Joseph put it is, I will not sin against my God.
It's been one of my favorite things since I was like 20 years old.
Love it.
When I first came into the faith and started reading the Bible and studying it, and I saw that story, and I was like, man, he didn't say, "I'm not going to sin against Potiphar."
Right.
He said, "I'm not going to sin against God," Yeah. And it was just like, so it's definitely sticks out, it's the heart of, which is why everything around the story of Joseph, he's continually being blessed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the father knew his heart was trying to be obedient, and so he gets put in jail. He gets duties in jail, and he gets supervision duties over other jailers in jail. What are these guys doing in there? It reminds me of modern jails where they have like chores and jobs and things like that. And I'm like, apparently they, because see in movies and TVs like old dungeons from ancient worlds, it's just people in there rotting with big beards. But apparently,
I would assume they were probably used like servants.
Yeah,
I don't know if they came out of the dungeon or how that worked, but it definitely seems like there's a bit more activity going on than maybe went like Paul's situation where he just had time to write letters.
Well, yeah, he's chained up and they put the paper next to his hand and he's like, "I'm going to write a letter while chained up."
Yeah.
So, apparently there's a lot of activity happening in this king's jail. And yeah, who knows? They could be making garments or whatever. I don't
Right.
know. But yeah, so I think it's fascinating that even while in jail, the guy is standing out.
Yeah, he's being
it's
shown
hard.
favor.
You know,
He's being shown favor.
And even though Potiphar was mad at him, gosh, you gotta. It makes me wonder. Again, like we've talked about multiple times on this show, you know, that there is extra biblical books that sometimes we'll reference. That one that we've never put on screen for people, but we've mentioned because it's interesting, and we're still testing the book ourselves, is the book of Jasher.
Mm-hmm.
And the book of Jasher has a lot of information about this particular time period in Joseph's life and this interaction with Potiphar's wife, to the point where it says like an entire year goes by where she's daily throughout the entire year pressing him to hook up with her. And to the point where once this actually happens and she actually accuses him that Potiphar didn't even quite believe her at the beginning because he was like, Joseph?
Yeah.
No way, not Joseph. And then they apparently went, according to Jasher, I'll let you read it and test it for yourself, but apparently they went before a system of judges, and Joseph was trying to defend himself with logic and common reason because of the way his tunic was torn and didn't match the story of Potiphar's wife, and the judges deemed him innocent, and Potiphar threw him in jail anyway because he had to appease his wife.
Yeah.
So it was just like, yeah.
But then he's shown favor by Potiphar in the jail.
And
So whether or not Jasher is to be trusted as scripture or not, there was some reason that Potiphar was still showing him favor once he was actually in jail.
Yeah.
And another detail about this story is how she claims that she screamed out.
Yes.
Now we see in Deuteronomy 22, is it?
Deuteronomy 22. It's 23 and 24.
There is a commandment about a woman crying out versus not crying out, and in cases of fornication or cases of rape. So in cases of rape, the woman, it talks about her crying out. So basically, this is an issue of consenting and not consenting. If the woman doesn't cry out, both the man and the woman are punished. So now this doesn't mean
the Egyptians were following the law of God.
Right, exactly.
But clearly there was a cultural standard.
There was a cultural standard of verbally saying, resisting in some way, verbally, no, I'm not okay with this or whatever, screaming out, whatever. But she focuses on that, I cried out.
Yes, it mentions it multiple times. And I screamed,
Yeah.
And so that I think that if it is just a cultural adaptation from the general principle of all the nations of this is how you determine if it's rape or not.
Right.
Then to me, that would only make sense if they all had the same cultural tradition, because they all came from Noah just a couple hundred years earlier. All these people, just don't forget Noah's really close to these people, in the timeline. And so if he's teaching them righteousness through Shem being passed down, and these kids are going out and they're keeping pieces of it. Yeah. They may not keep the fullness of it or the heart of it, but some of the practicality of the day-to-day living, they're going to keep pieces of it.
This is where you get the atheists saying, I don't need a book to tell me what's right from wrong. I know it's wrong to steal. I know it's wrong to do this or that. Well, yeah, technically you actually know that because going all the way back, your forefather Noah taught all of his sons that, and it trickled down.
That's right.
It's not that you have this innate sense inside of you that just knows right from wrong. You were taught that at some point by someone who was taught that by someone who was taught that.
That's right. Yeah. And that's, that's a whole nother show, I guess, for the genealogies and the importance of the timelines.
But the big thing is, let's just remember, guys, that this issue of women doing these types of things is nothing new. It's nothing new. It's not a phenomenon in Western culture. It's not a phenomenon, on college campuses. This seems to be an ongoing issue for my gender. Sorry, guys.
All it boils down to is manipulation.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just she didn't get what she wanted,
really,
so she's trying to manipulate the circumstances in spite.
What's interesting is really in the same way that rape is about power and control, this falsely accusing someone of rape is about power and control.
It truly is.
She tried to have power and control over him. She tried to have her way with him. She couldn't. So she exacted that power and control in the opposite way by just, getting him in trouble.
That's right.
Interesting.
It reminds me of that old saying, people like bad guys in movies are like, well, if I can't have it, no one can. So she's just going to ruin the dude's life and try to put him in jail for the rest of his life.
It's terrible.
And I'm sure she would have had him killed if she could have. But anyway, so let's get on to chapter 40.
Moving on.
And so let me set this up here. So in chapter 40, we get to read verse 1. It says, "Then it came about after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in the confinement of the house of the captain of the guard in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. The captain of the guard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. And then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. He asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in the confinement in the master's house, 'Why are your faces so sad today?' And they said to him, 'We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it.' And then Joseph said to them, 'Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please.' So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph, and he said to him, 'In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe figs. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand.' Then Joseph said to him, 'This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh. Get me out of this house. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon.' When the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, 'I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread in my hand.' On my head. And in the top basket there were some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Then Joseph answered and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. And within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off you." Thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all of his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. There it is. So, man, Pharaoh's got some twisted ideas for a birthday present.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Caesars.
Well,
burn Christians while eating dinner.
Yeah.
And that's just like, it's crazy. So clearly unrighteousness is happening with some things here. But at the same time, I don't know what the chief baker did. It doesn't really say what he did. But just as we were talking about earlier, these guys are in charge of his food and drink.
You know what?
Is important.
I bet I know what it was.
What's that?
He overcooked the steak. I mean, who wants a well-done steak, babe? Come on.
Baby, remember what Chef Gordon Ramsay talks about, how it's a skill to make a well-done steak that still has juice in it.
Maybe he served it to him raw. Sorry, guys.
No, that would have been the lamb he would have served, not a steak.
Without any lamb sauce.
Yeah, the lamb sauce. So
sorry, guys. I have a secret love of MasterChef. And I've been binging on it lately, so he's always teasing me about raw steak and where's the lamb sauce.
The dude says everything is raw.
That's his catchphrase, babe.
Anyway, so
don't judge me, guys. Please don't judge me.
So I'm listening to nothing but MasterChef in the background as I'm trying to do videos and listening to him scream at people for raw lamb. It's my background noise
while I wrap my jewelry.
I don't know why the people keep trying to cook lamb for him, and nobody can get it right.
Yeah, you really shouldn't. You shouldn't cook lamb for Chef Ramsay.
But thankfully, Chef Ramsay is not Pharaoh, because that's the attitude we're seeing ever.
Yeah.
Joseph is not getting any props anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. He's getting disrespected on every level. He's being patient in spirit. He's being patient to wait it out, wait on the Lord, and that's what's important here.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I would like to draw the attention to, is that even though he did something really good for the cupbearer didn't care.
Yeah.
And we got we got him just ignoring Joseph once he get out of there, which I think is sad. But what I think was interesting was, I think it was midway through the chapter. It was when Joseph was talking to the cupbearer, and he's like, look, I was sold into slavery to get here from the land of Hebrews. And when I got here, I've done nothing wrong and I'm in jail. Like he's trying to plead his case, right? He's pulling out the violin for his sob story, right? Which it is a sad story of injustice, right? But what's interesting to me is he calls, in talking to the cupbearer, he says, I was sold into slavery here from the land of the Hebrews.
Right. This
is interesting, okay? Because the scriptures continually call that area where they lived the land of Canaan.
Right.
And even as we're going to read in probably next week, in the portion next week, Jacob himself is talking to Pharaoh, and he says, yeah, I've been, sojourning in the land of Canaan all my life.
Yeah.
They did not consider it to be their land. It's very interesting, guys. Very interesting. And so it's not called the land of Shem. It's not called the land of Eber at any point in scripture. And this is, as far as I can remember or think of at this point, this is the only time I see it's called the land of the Hebrews during this time period that they're in, right? Because otherwise you got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob calling it the land of Canaan and that they're sojourning in this land. Is this Joseph alluding to a kingdom to come?
I mean, everything about Joseph's story is not just a shadow of Yeshua, but as we know from Jubilees, it's a shadow of the millennial reign.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And
it's really strange.
Just to explain to anyone who's new to our channel why we would emphasize that the patriarchs called themselves sojourners in that land and didn't consider it that land, it's because the patriarchs understood the promised land that we are all waiting for comes down from heaven on the day of the Lord, and it's called the New Jerusalem. So that piece of dirt over there that everybody seems to love to fight over and say they own it, it's theirs, it was given to them by whoever, they don't seem to understand what Abraham and all his sons understood, which is that they're just sojourners in that land.
That's right.
And they're waiting for the city built by God. Yeah.
That's right. And this is what Hebrews 11 and 12 talk about.
Yeah.
So if you go, I would encourage you guys, if you're not familiar with the idea, to go read Hebrews 11 and 12, because it says what we just surmised for you. Is they understood the gospel of the kingdom of God, which Jesus talked about everywhere he went. They understood it from way back then because it was told to them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I would say this was the original message told to Adam, but it's kind of difficult to prove in the canon of 66 that we have in America. And if you bring in the other books that other nations have had for a long time, it's easy to prove. But yeah, there's been an underlying theme, and this is one of our heart's intentions for the Torah portions, for these kingdom portions, which is why we call them kingdom portions, is because we want people to understand that even as far back as Genesis, all this stuff is paralleling or pointing to or being a metaphor of or giving us a lesson about the kingdom to come.
Yeah.
That's why all this stuff is for. That's why, if you haven't seen last week, we did at the end of the video last week, we did a breakdown on the prophetic nature of Genesis 35 and how it pointed to the kingdom of God in sequential order in the events of the life of Jacob. It was beautiful. I mean, we were so grateful all week that the Father let us, see these sequential events and be like, oh my goodness, there's the resurrection. There's being taken to the New Jerusalem. There's our robes of righteousness. Like here's a marriage supper of the Lamb. Here's it's just amazing. It's amazing, guys. So if you haven't seen last week's, check that out as well. Okay, so now we can go on to our pairings.
Our pairings.
I said it right.
You did. I did. Well. Yeah, we'll give you that. We'll give you that one, babe.
I'll get it right at some point. So our pairings this week is going to be out of, our first one is from the Ketuvim. It's going to be 1 Chronicles 2, verses 3 and 4. So let me put that up on the screen for everybody. And 1 Chronicles is one of those books that you're like, man, not a lot of people really get down on Chronicles,
Right.
But
and we don't see it in Torah portions very often either.
No, because, it's history.
Yeah.
And it's cataloging history. It's not,
yeah, people don't find it as interesting or fun to read, I guess.
But we thought it was interesting here in 1 Chronicles 2:3 because of what we just read about the events of Judah's life. So in verse 3, it starts saying the sons of Judah were Onan, and Shelah. These three were born to him by Bathshua, the Canaanitess. And here we actually get the name of Judah's wife, which is great, Bathshua. And as we explained, that literally in the Hebrew just means the daughter of Shua. And then Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so we put him to death. That repeats what we just read in Genesis 38. Tamar, his daughter-in-law, bore him Perez and Zerah. Judah had 5 sons in all. The sons of Perez were Hezron, Hamul, and the sons of Zerah were Zimri, Ethan, Himal, Kalkal, and Dara. 5 of them in all. The sons of Carmi were Akar, and the troubler of Israel, who violated the ban, the son of Ethan, was Azariah. Sweetie, I got the difficult names again this week.
Gee, I'm so sorry.
I think it's just.
I think I just need to have a sore throat every week.
That's right. So basically, so this is good because it gives us, what happened to Perez and Zerah, right? We get their sons and everything. And apparently, the son of Carmi, this guy named Akar, was a troubler of Israel.
Yeah.
Right? We'll probably read about that in another portion. And real quick, though, let's go to Isaiah 49, 6-7, because this has a little bit of relevance to, I think we may have, I don't know if that was put in the actual portion or not, but we'll read this one real quick as well as it relates. Verse 6 says, he says, is it too small a thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, to restore the preserved ones of Israel? I will also make you a light of the nations, so that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. Thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and its Holy One, to the despised one, to the one abhorred by the nation, to the servant of rulers. Kings will see and arise. Princes will also bow down, because of the Lord, who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, who is chosen. All right. So this in relation to some of the dreams that we read about Joseph.
Right.
Okay.
That's
and
right.
the mother, father, and brothers bowing down. We're going to see that fulfilled inside the New Jerusalem with Yeshua, right? Which is what this passage is prophesying about. Yeshua, our King and Lord, Yeshua of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, is the servant that's being raised up by the Father so that, to restore the preserved ones of Israel.
And the reason we paired this is because we noticed how, because of Joseph's presence and him being blessed by the Lord, everyone around him was blessed.
That's right.
It wasn't just Joseph who was blessed. Potiphar's household was blessed,
right.
And then Pharaoh was blessed because of Joseph. And so what we saw there was a parallel to how in the kingdom, we're literally going to be a light to the nations, and we're going to bless all of the people who survive that day of the Lord, and they need to come for healing, and they need to come, obviously, not just for regular food, but to be fed with the word, which is the most important meal of the day. We're going to be a light to them. We're going to be a blessing to them in the same way, on a much smaller scale, that Joseph was a blessing to the surrounding, the people that he was dwelling amongst.
That's right. And we get our blessing from Yeshua.
Exactly.
Who is the salvation that reaches to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
So, hence his name meaning salvation. And so we give all praise and glory to our King.
Yeah, amen.
And we love, I think people have done this in the past, and they've taken Joseph's life throughout Genesis and just they've written down all the parallels that happened in his life. And there's over 100.
Yeah.
And it all parallels to what happened with Yeshua's life.
And that's even without adding Jubilees into making a little chart. Like, that chart would be extra long if they had Jubilees added as well. Because, we'll get to some interesting stuff in Jubilees in the next portions. I don't want to give too much away. There's some juicy
there's a lot of good
there.
stuff.
But there's some really cool parallels to Joseph's time, just under second in command under Pharaoh, to the millennial reign. So.
All right. And so our next pairing that we want to read for tonight is going to be from the Brit Hadasha, which is just the New Testament. And that's going to be from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 11 through 17. And we bring everyone with us here. And so here in 2 Corinthians, it says, our mouth has spoken freely to you, O Corinthians. Our heart is open wide. You are not restrained by us, but you are restrained in your own affections. Now in a like exchange, I speak as to children. Open wide to us also. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnership have righteousness and lawless, or what fellowship have light with darkness? Or what harmony has Christ with Belial? Or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? Or what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God, just as God said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore, come out from their midst and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. It's 1 Corinthians 6. I think it's 2 Corinthians. I'm sorry, guys. I think I made a typo.
Yeah.
But
so unequal yoking.
Yeah, this is where we were getting this concept of unequal yoking from Judah and his wife Bathsheba. All right. Here in the next portion here, it's going to be from Jubilees, and this is starting off in chapter 34, and we've paired this up with some of the things that went down in Genesis as well. So in Jubilees 34, 10 through 15, it says, and in the 7th year of this week, he sent Joseph to learn about the welfare of his brothers from his house to the land of Shechem, and he found them in the land of Dothan. Oh, just real quick, baby. Did you remember? Do you remember when we were reading this in Genesis? And he says Joseph went to the area of Shechem, and a man found him in the field wandering around.
Yeah.
And the man comes up to him and he says, "What are you doing?" And Joseph's like, "Hello, sir. I'm looking for my brothers." No, you know what it reminds me of?
You and your ex.
Sorry, that's my Tiny Tim accent. So anyway, so what it reminds me of though is that you ever play one of those role-playing games where like you go to the different town and you talk to the welder or the blacksmith or just the random stranger in town and you try to get information from them?
Yeah, I wasn't D&D, but
it's not D&D. It's just like regular role-playing games as far as just adventure games where you go to different towns and you have to get information.
Yeah, I've played them.
And acquire different things. And so like that's what this scene reminds me of, is like you just this dude's walking through the field. And then there's some random dude. We don't get his name. We don't know where he came from. We don't know what this is about.
Genesis is kind of written that way.
What happened last week in Shechem?
Yeah.
All the men were killed.
Yeah.
So where'd this guy come from?
Yeah.
So clearly they've repopulated some of the area now. And we've got this random dude that just walks up to Joseph. "What are you doing?" "Well, hello, sir. I'm looking for my brothers. Do you have any information for me?" Scroll down option menu. Yes. "They went to Dothan." "Well, thank you, sir. Here's 5 pence for your time." Like it just
shekels.
Excuse me, shekels for your Shechem time. Yeah, I don't. It's weird the way it's written from a writer's perspective. I just smile, because I'm like, look, this is so vague and so like dun, 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 matter of fact, 1, 2, 3, and it's just and again, that's why the reason I point out fun little stuff like that is because it always reminds me that Genesis specifically, as well as Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, they're encoded.
Yeah.
So God put these words there intentionally, and sometimes it sounds like it's repeating itself. Sometimes it sounds really vague and uninformative. Sometimes, so this is the fun stuff where you get to dig in, look for context, define words, see what these words mean, try to occasionally pull up an old school map and see where these towns are located. You know what I'm saying? So you can kind of get your bearings on what may be happening to find the context of the circumstances and situation, because what seems, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes there's passages in Genesis that seem a little hard to read. It doesn't flow very well with their normal reading pattern as we would a modern magazine or book or something like that. It's because it's encoded. There's things put in there intentionally that seem a little different, because in the Hebrew, in the original text, they were finding all kinds of fun stuff that the Father encoded. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there for folks. Let's get back to it. So Jubilees 34 here, and he says, he found them in the land of Dothan, and they dealt treacherously with him and formed a plot against him. This is, of course, the brothers dealing with Joseph. But changing their minds, they sold him to Ishmaelite merchants, and they brought him down into Egypt, and they sold him to Potiphar, the eunuch of Pharaoh, the chief of the cooks, priest of the city of Elu. So apparently, this guy had a little bit more than just being a cook.
Yes.
So he was a priest of the city of Elu. So I guess I'm just guessing that's where he was staying. I don't know where the city of Elu is off the top of my head, but or if that translates from ancient Egyptian word into something else. And then the sons of Jacob slaughtered a kid. So this is the brothers of Jacob slaughtered a kid, dipped the coat of Joseph in the blood, and sent it to Jacob their father on the 10th of the 7th month. And he mourned all night, for they had brought it to him in the evening, and he became feverish with mourning for his death. And he said, "An evil beast has devoured Joseph." And all the members of his house mourned with him that day, and they were grieving and mourning with him all that day. And his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted for his son. And on that day, Bilhah heard that Joseph had perished, and she died mourning him. And she was living in, I can't say this word,
Kaphrateph.
Kaphrateph.
There you go.
Kaphrateph. Yeah, I think that's right. And Dinah also, his daughter, died after Joseph had perished. And then we'll go down, continue reading here through 19. And there came these 3 mournings upon Israel in 1 month, and they buried Bilhah over against the tomb of Rachel, and Dinah also, his daughter, they buried there. And he mourned for Joseph 1 year and did not cease, for he said, "Let me go down to the grave mourning for my son." For this reason, it is ordained for the children of Israel that they should afflict themselves on the 10th of the 7th month, on the day that the news which made him weep for Joseph came to Jacob his father, that they should make atonement for themselves thereon with a young goat on the 10th of the 7th month, once a year, for their sins, for they had grieved the affection of their father regarding Joseph his son. And this day had been ordained that they should grieve thereon for their sins, and for all their transgressions and for all their errors, so that they might cleanse themselves on that day once a year.
Wow.
All right. So we're going to stop sharing for a minute. So many things going on here, guys. As you may be catching on to, that's why we titled the show as we did on this particular episode, Joseph and the Day of Atonement. This is the origins of the Day of Atonement, according to Jubilees. This is why we don't get any backstory on the Day of Atonement in the book of Leviticus. It's just, oh, by the way, on the 10th of this month, you should do this. This is the Day of Atonement. Man, so 3 people died as a result of them lying about Joseph.
Yeah.
That's wild. Well, technically 2, I guess. Joseph didn't technically die, but they're
right.
But in Jacob's mind, there was 3 deaths, which is why it was mourning so long. Nothing about fasting on this day.
Trigger warning. I wish I'd known you were going to say that. Trigger warning.
We'll leave that for a different episode.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's the thing. Remember when we read this story in Genesis, right?
Yeah.
Where it said Reuben heard what his brothers were plotting and conspiring, and Reuben said, let's not do this. And he tried to talk him out of it, and he did. But then when they put him in the well and they left and they came back and he wasn't there because the Ishmaelites had already got him, then Reuben says, oh, man. Because remember, it was Reuben's idea that he would eventually pull him out and bring him back and somehow work it out. So Reuben was actually trying to look out for Joseph. But then when he sees that Joseph's missing, Reuben says to his brothers, he's gone. Where am I to go?
Yeah.
Now, why would he say that? Why would Reuben say, where am I going to go? Reuben was the elder. He's the firstborn.
Yeah.
He had, in a sense of authority over the others, to the point where he's responsible for his brothers.
Yeah.
He is his brother's keeper. You know what I'm saying? That's why the father asked Cain, where's Abel?
Yeah.
Right? And Cain lips off to the creator. I don't get it. So anyway, we got Reuben feeling the weight of what's going down here. He feels responsibility for his younger brother Jacob, who's 17. Reuben's clearly a grown man at this point because he's the oldest. He could be in his 50s. I don't know. So the point is, Reuben is doing all he can to save Joseph, and he does. And it works out as a great blessing. And we're going to read in later chapters how that denouement comes between Reuben and Joseph, and it's wonderful. So, but also we got this idea that they come back and they tell him, here's the coat, here's the coat dipped in blood. We assume he's dead by a wild animal. You make the call. Jacob says, yes, apparently he's dead by a wild animal, and he's grieving for a whole year. And he starts a new tradition. Imagine the irony. This is just, to me, it's super ironic that this until they figure out how many years was it? 17? Until they found Joseph in Egypt, until Joseph reveals himself later in Egypt as
I don't know the exact amount of years.
I think it's about 17 or 20 years, because he's like 37 or 38 when it happens that he sees his brother later. So for almost 2 decades, every year, these guys got to be reminded of what they did.
They watched his father mourn like that for an entire year. They watched two. Their sister dies.
Their sister dies.
One of their mothers dies.
The grief on these brothers for almost 2 decades. And guys, I wasn't laughing out of jesting. I'm laughing because I don't know what other emotion than the cry. Like, these guys are just. No wonder it's called afflict yourself. Yeah. And consider your sins on the Day of Atonement.
Feel guilty. Grieve your sins. Like, I just can't imagine. I mean, the guilt would just be eating me alive if I had been involved in that.
Which is why we see, in my opinion, it's why we're going to see in later pairings and portions in a couple weeks from now, whenever they meet and they realize he's alive later in Egypt and they see him, like, they're just overcome.
Yeah.
And they're even talking about what they did to Joseph years earlier while they're being hassled by Joseph in disguise in the court of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Remember that? So we'll get to it later. But we just want you to keep this in mind, because that's going to give us all kinds of context for how we see the brothers reacting down the road when they actually see that Joseph's alive and they're being messed with by Joseph. So I'm running out of liquid. Can I borrow some water?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that this is the event, because Jubilees is a cool book in that it explains quite a few events that inspire some of the feasts that we now keep today. We know these feasts were already ordained on the heavenly tablets and kept in heaven. But as far as how they came about on earth and the patriarchs starting to keep them, we have backstories on some of these things. And the Day of Atonement, it's just, that was the last thing I expected to be the event that, sparked that initial, mourning that took place. I just, all this time, I just, think about the brothers and how for not just for that whole year where they had to watch what they put their father through, but then all that time they had to make sure they kept that secret. Yeah. I mean, all that time until they found Joseph again, they all had to make sure that they all kept their stories straight, and they all, they might have assumed he was killed. So
what are we doing on the Day of Atonement according to Leviticus?
We're
confessing our sins.
Yeah, confessing our sins and grieving over them, and really.
What are these guys doing every year for almost 20 years on this Day of Atonement? They're holding in their sins. They're not confessing their sins.
Wow.
So, okay. So the point is, guys, the idea here that I really would like to bring it all into, okay, because you've got the father instituting, the father who's, has eldership and passed his priesthood on to Levi. The father's instituting a new tradition, okay, a new concept here. And that tradition is carried over into law in Leviticus. And as a result of this, though, he is asking his sons every year to be reminded of this events, okay? They're not confessing for this event. Not until, like I said, I need to go back and do the math. I think it's 20 years. But they're not confessing for another 20 years about this event every year. So they're not even fulfilling the heart of what this event was about to begin with. Yeah. To be grieving, to afflict yourselves, thinking of your sins, to be mournful. And here we have this whole concept of, during that time period, are they righteous?
I mean,
so okay.
I don't know, I mean, how righteous are any of us?
So the point is, what I'm trying to get to before you keep going, one second, before you keep going, what I'm trying to get to though is the Father knows all of our secret sins, guys.
Yeah.
He knows everything we're not telling someone else. He knows everything in our heart and mind. And guess what? You're going and asking for prayer and atonement. He knows what you're not saying or what you're not asking. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not trying to judge their hearts as far as they maybe never secretly asked the Father for forgiveness, but they sure didn't tell the person they offended, who they caused such great harm to, right? Not just through his own personal grieving, but through the grieving to the point of losing other family members. So they didn't reveal the truth of the scenario to the people they hurt by it and try to make atonement for what they did for 20 years. So the problem is, how does that relate to us? You see what I'm saying? It's like, how does that relate to us as people? Like we carry things with us that maybe someone else didn't see it. I don't feel good about it, but we know the Father sees it. The Father sees everything. But at the same time, so the point is, these guys weren't deemed unrighteous during that time period.
Right.
Nothing in the book ever says, during that time period, these guys weren't righteous, because they were not actually doing the heart of the law to fulfill Day of Atonement. Okay? Because remember how Jesus tried to explain to us, you can do the deeds of the law in your actions, but if your heart's not in it, you're not keeping the spirit of the law. You know what I mean? You have to circumcise your heart in willful obedience and transparency to the Father to make your actions on the outside mean anything at all.
Right.
Okay? So these guys, they're holding in this secret for a long time, but they're still participating in this traditional ritual Day of Atonement that their father instituted.
Levi has the priesthood at this point.
This is why I said at the very beginning of the show, one of the details that we're not getting is how many brothers were involved in this and what's going on there. I think all of them. You're welcome to put in the comments, guys, if I'm missing a verse somewhere. But it's interesting to me that it just mentions the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah had a bad report about them. Okay, and I don't know what that exactly means, to be honest with you. maybe just simply means that they weren't doing their shepherding jobs well, and that's why Jacob later sends Joseph to check on them, just giving us some credence to why he would even send them out to check on them. It's because Joseph was basically coming out to check on them to begin with, right? So he's kind of like their status report guy, to the father, since apparently they weren't shepherding these flocks anywhere near Hebron,
right?
So I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot to it, and we got a couple more that we can read into real quick.
I definitely, it shows the mercy of the Father and his loving kindness and his long suffering and his patience with us.
Yeah.
Because that's the 12. That's where the 12 tribes come from.
That's right.
If it was all of them, that's 11 out of the 12.
Yeah.
Well, I guess except for
even if it's just 5 of them.
Benjamin was born
later.
Yeah. But yeah, so.
Well, that's why in the dream he had the sun, the moon, and 11 stars.
Right.
So was Benjamin born already?
Yes. Rachel had Benjamin before she died. She died in childbirth.
That's right. Yeah. So Benjamin was probably
but he was probably a younger kid, because if Joseph was 17 at the time, Benjamin would have been younger. So, definitely. But in any case, those details don't matter as much, I guess, as the bigger picture of Father being incredibly compassionate. So some
ridiculous tragic irony in this passage. This portion was just so heavy. We're doing our best to try to keep it short. We're almost done, guys. But there's just so much to go into between Judah and Tamar, between Joseph and Potiphar's wife, between this concept of Jacob's reaction to Joseph's seeming death and the Day of Atonement being initiated. And everything that means for us going forward, and how it points to the kingdom, the great Day of Atonement, where our souls are raised out of Sheol and we're resurrected on the day of the Lord, because our high priest makes atonement for us through Yeshua. As Yeshua, our high priest is Yeshua. So I just think that there's a lot of fun implications here. And I think, if nothing else, it just shows us that the Father is long-suffering. Because these guys, he continued to have a purpose for all of them. He continued to know these guys' names are already written on the gates of the New Jerusalem in the Father's mind and the heavenly tablets. Yeah. And they're 20 years of hiding a sin. 20 years. Yeah. So I just think that, it just shows the Father's mercy. Yeah. He's so loving. He sees the end from the beginning, and he still has a purpose and a plan for us. Yeah. And he still guides us all along the way to try to get us to that purpose and that plan, even when we're not being fully transparent with him.
While we were yet sinners.
That's right. Yeah. He's wonderful, wonderful and merciful Father. We love him. All right. So let's go on to the final parent. I think it's Sirach is all we have left. And then we'll be able to close it up. So actually it's not. I'm wrong. It's Jubilees 34, 20 through 21. And I think this is where we're going to read a little bit about some of the things about the wives they took.
Oh, okay.
So then, because after Joseph was seemingly dead, these guys all took wives.
Okay.
So, all right. So after Joseph perished, the sons of Jacob took unto themselves wives. The name of Reuben's wife was Ada, and the name of Simeon's wife was, I can't even say this word, Adelbiah, a Canaanite. Adelbiah.
Adelbal? Just say Alba.
So here's the thing. He's marrying a Canaanite again.
Yes.
It's craziness. Yeah. Okay. And the name of Levi's wife is Melka.
No, that's Simeon, not Judah.
I know. Yeah. I'm sorry. Another Canaanite woman, again, is being thrown in the mix. Yeah. But it's Simeon's wife this time. And the name of Levi's wife is Melka, the daughter of Aram, of the seed of the sons of Terah. The name of Judah's wife was Betasuel, a Canaanite. Now we know what happened to her later. In case you guys are wondering, this is a summation of their wives. Okay. The name of Issachar's wife is Hizakah. The name of Zebulon's wife was Neiman. The name of Dan's wife was Eglah. And the name of Naphtali's wife was Rasu'u of Mesopotamia. And the name of Gad's wife was Makkah. And the name of Asher's wife is Ijona. And the name of Joseph's wife was Asenath, the Egyptian. The name of Benjamin's wife was Issachar.
When we have a kid, we're naming it with a name that has one syllable, okay?
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what that name is. I think it's Japanese.
Ichisaka.
I think
it does sound Japanese.
The origin of the Japanese clans. I don't know what's happened here. So it says, and Simeon repented and took a second wife from Mesopotamia as his brothers.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah for repentance.
Okay. And then let's keep reading here. And Jubilees 39, verse 6-8, real quick. But he did not surrender his soul, and he remembered the Lord and the words which Jacob his father used to read from amongst the words of Abraham, that no man should commit fornication with a woman who is a husband, that for him the punishment of death has been ordained in the heavens before the Most High God, and the sin will be recorded against him in the eternal books continually before the Lord. And Joseph remembered these words and refused to lie with her. And she besought him for a year, but he refused and would not listen.
So there were words that they were having read to them long before the Torah was given on Mount Sinai.
Yeah, so this is, of course, about Joseph resisting Potiphar's wife, and that's why we paired that short portion from Jubilees 39. And then we're going to go into Sirach. But real quick, before we do that, I just want to make a comment that what we read in Jubilees 34 just then about all the wives that the brothers married, though it was a summation, okay? It wasn't in chronological order of what we've read in this portion. It's just a reminder that it said Simeon repented and then took another wife.
Yeah.
So they learned, and though it doesn't give us a timeline, it makes me wonder, since we already read that Judah's wife died, and he basically took Tamar. It doesn't say what happened, but I'm guessing Tamar was his wife from that point forward.
Legally speaking.
According to the Torah, legally speaking.
Yeah.
So that means that now Judah's quote unquote safe and marrying the right people.
Yeah.
And then Simeon, is that why he repented? I don't know. Was it because of the Day of Atonement he repented? That was initiated after Joseph's death? Because that's how that started out. It was after Joseph's death. Here's the wives they took.
Yeah, we can only speculate as to why, other than it was clearly against the law. We have in some of the lesser prophets, we learn about the Jews coming back from out of Babylon, right? And some of them had married Babylonian women whatever. And
I think it's Zechariah 8 and 9. No, excuse me, Nehemiah 8 and 9.
You're the Sean Encyclopedia, so I'll just go with whatever book you think it is. But we see that they came back and they divorced their wives because they had, they must have been Canaanites or Babylonians or whatever, but they intermarried with people they weren't supposed to intermarry with. Yeah. So, and guys, this isn't about race or genetics or anything like that. This is about the unequal yoking that goes on.
That's right. Because how does an Egyptian become an Israelite?
Well, by coming into covenant.
That's right.
Exactly.
So we have Joseph marrying Asenath.
Right.
An Egyptian woman.
Yes.
We had Hagar being taken as a second wife to Abraham, given by Sarah, who was an Egyptian woman. She was not of, you know what I'm saying? So the point is, it's about covenant. Yeah. It's about covenant. If you're coming to do the deeds of this, if you're submitting yourself to the authority of the Almighty through his covenant, his terms defined in the covenant, you become part of Israel. Yeah. You're no longer in the Gentile category.
I can testify that an unequally yoked marriage causes a lot of turmoil for the children on a spiritual level. I come from a family where my parents weren't equally yoked, and a lot of you guys know my story. I mean, I definitely was not a believer. I was a total, new age hippie. I mean, I wanted nothing to do with the Bible, and it broke my father's heart, but they weren't equally yoked. And, my mom had a lot of influence on me. And, and then we look at, what goes on with Judah and his family and his children and the behavior that they exhibit. And really, it reminded me a lot of, my story that, gosh, that's what unequal yoking can bring, not just to you and your relationship, but your children as well. And Sean and I really have a heart for unequally yoked couples, and we pray for unequally yoked couples all the time, because I can just only imagine how hard that is to. And
we've had people ask us to pray for them over the last year. Multiple couples.
Yeah, that it drives such a wedge between people who really love each other on that level of love, but as far as walking the same walk, how hard that must be. And we really feel blessed that we're equally yoked, and because of that, I think a lot about people who aren't blessed the way we are to be pretty much in agreement on all these things. So while we're live tonight, if anyone wants to agree with us in lifting up all the unequally yoked couples, especially during this season, there are some people whose spouses are keeping Christmas and they're not, and I'm just sure the turmoil that can come from that. I just pray for peace and shalom in those houses, because my heart just really hurts for all the unequally yoked couples out there. So anyways, moving on.
No, it's a painful thing. It's an emotional thing that we all deal with in our lives, because everyone is at a different place in their heart, coming to obedience to the Father, right? And when you have for generations, these quote unquote spiritual leaders within churches telling you, well, here is the only thing you have to do to be with God. You just believe in Jesus, and then you walk in love, and then you don't get any actual definitions of those things. Everything's out of context. People start finding definitions of what those word means, and they want to do it with sincerity and a pure heart. And then you get other people who have not come to that place yet. And so you've got a little bit of mixing there that's happening slowly over time. So our heart goes out to all the families out there that are still dealing with that this season. And we love you guys. We love you guys. So I'm just, I feel grateful that the Father brought us together. Because it's kind of a rare thing that we're both nerds about the word. Yeah, total nerds. We both love it. So
it's pretty much all we do outside of me making jewelry and watching MasterChef, of course.
That's right.
We watch MasterChef and make jewelry and study the Bible.
If he's watching, I want to give a shout out to Todd Ranch King, who told me to find her because she was the girl version of me.
On Facebook.
And so thank you, Todd, for listening to the Spirit of God to try to bring us together. We feel like that was a blessing. Yeah. So, all right.
All right. Got one more.
We're going to read from Sirach, and then we'll be done.
We're almost done. Promise, guys. Sorry.
All right. So here in Sirach chapter 15, we're going to be reading 1 through 20. It says, he that fears the Lord will do good, and he that has the knowledge of the law shall obtain her. And as a mother shall she meet him, and receive him as a wife married of a virgin. With the bread of understanding shall she feed him, and give him the water of wisdom to drink. He shall be stayed upon her, and shall not be moved, and shall rely upon her, and shall not be confounded. She shall exalt him above his neighbors, and in the midst of the congregation shall she open his mouth. He shall find joy and a crown of gladness, and she shall cause him to inherit an everlasting name. But foolish men shall not attain unto her, and sinners shall not see her. For she is far from pride, and men that are liars cannot remember her. Praise is not seemly in the mouth of a sinner, for it was not sent him of the Lord. For praise shall be uttered in wisdom, and the Lord will prosper it. And here in verses 11 through 20, it says, say not thou, it is through the Lord that I fell away, for you ought not to do the things that he hates. Say not thou, he has caused you to err, for he has no need of the sinful man. The Lord hates all abomination, and they that fear God love it not. He himself made man from the beginning, and left him in the hand of his counsel. If you wilt, to keep the commandments, and to perform acceptable faithfulness, he has set fire and water before you. Stretch forth your hand unto wherever you will. Before man is life and death, and whether him likeness shall be given him. For the wisdom of the Lord is great, and he is mighty in power, and beholds all things, and his eyes are upon them that fear him, and he knows every work of every man. He has commanded no man to do wickedly, neither has he given any man license to sin.
That last one just needs to be a bumper sticker.
That's right. That's right.
If we ever start a little website making t-shirts and bumper stickers,
that's right.
Let's put that one on the list.
Some kingdom merch. All right. So I love this passage, not only because we're seeing a description of what Joseph is exhibiting in his lifetime, right? Because he's using wisdom and honoring the Lord. So therefore, because he's knowledgeable of the law and he obtains wisdom, therefore he's being exalted amongst his neighbors and in the congregation where he is, and he's been given an everlasting name. We even see that written on the gates, the New Jerusalem, the name of Joseph.
Right.
So we just see this wonderful idea of Sirach describing how a man whose heart is devoted to God, to keep the commandments, to perform acceptable faithfulness, as it says here, and I think it's verse 14, and that just as we read in Deuteronomy 27:28, the Father is saying the same thing in Sirach 15, before man is life and death, right? Yeah. What are you going to choose? Choose the commandments, you choose life. And this is the whole concept, because it is not from the Father to cause you to sin. The Spirit of God will not tell you to transgress the covenant or to stop doing the commandments, because he gives no man a license to sin. So we see this concept just thoroughly layered into all of the book, okay? Yeah. Is this idea of equating wisdom to keeping the commandments. And Joseph is exhibiting wisdom. The other brothers are not exhibiting wisdom. In fact, apparently, now this is again why I've been questioning the concept of are all the brothers involved in this? Because Levi was already shown to be exhibiting great wisdom previously, but then, and we get the bad report about just 4 of them. So, and then Reuben himself is trying in a weird way to do what's right, but he's still under the peer pressure of his brothers. So, he feared as well. And I just think it's interesting that the father then, Jacob, has to institute this Day of Atonement where they're to be mindful of their sins, to be mournful every year, to be consider this concept, because it's almost like he was watching the behavior of his sons, and it was not good. The things that they're doing, they're marrying the wrong people. They're marrying people out of covenant. They've got a bad attitude that's being related to them in some regard by Joseph. And basically, we already saw Jacob disagreed with how Simeon and Levi handled things previously. So Jacob's already got this kind of hesitant attitude of like, man, are my boys doing what's right? And he has to initiate this of like, okay, guys, at least once a year, I want you to think about your sins. And I want you to be mindful of this. This will be our Day of Atonement. Okay. And so it's almost like he's trying to just draw them back. Life is happening, distractions are coming, you're out there on the job, you're away from the influence of other people, you're making bad decisions, or you started your own family now, maybe you're with people that are not good for you, and just life is happening at this point for all the brothers as they're blossoming into adulthood. And the grandfather at this point is basically trying to figure out a way to say, okay, well, let's rein all this in. Let's not forget the commandments, wisdom, the covenant. And Joseph was exemplifying that in the worst of circumstances. Right?
For me, the biggest lesson of Joseph wasn't all the foreshadowing of Yeshua. I mean, to me, that was kind of an obvious thing. For me, what I love about Joseph is how he consistently exhibited the fruits of the Spirit that Paul lists in Galatians. Just incredibly, the forgiveness that he shows to his brothers when they do find him later. We'll go over it in the next portions. It touches my heart so deeply just to see that love and that reconciliation. And, his behavior is what I often, aside from our Messiah, I often think to myself, am I responding the way Joseph responded when he met his brothers? Am I responding the way that he responded while he was in that jail? I mean, every situation he was in, he just had the complete right attitude for it. And I just, aside from our Messiah, I think that's probably the best example in Scripture of someone who just exuded the fruits of the Spirit.
That's right. In fact, I even used him as an example in one of my Morning Cup videos. That's called Fruit of the Spirit versus the Law. I think that's what it's called. And so you guys are welcome to check that out on the channel. Go to the playlists under Morning Cup of Context, and you can look for the Fruit of the Spirit versus the Law, where I basically just show that the fruits of the Spirit prevalent in the Old Testament. I mean, it's just a part of doing righteousness. It affects your attitude, as we just read in Sirach there. So
why don't you pop onto the YouTube and we'll see who's in the chat?
Oh yeah, let's do that. You guys have any questions that you might want to?
If you've got a question that is directly related to the portion, drop it in the chat, because we're going to take a moment to pay a little attention to it. Want to say hi to Ken. Hi, brother Ken. Want to say hi to Raymond. Hey.
What's up, Raymond? What's
up,
Ken?
Donna's in there. I saw Tiffany a little while ago. People we know from Facebook. People dropped some super chats in there, and I just want to just bless your hearts and thank you so much. And we just appreciate you guys so much.
I didn't even realize we had that option.
I didn't know we had the option either.
All right, well, thank you guys. We really appreciate you guys. Miss Margaret Foster, thank you for your kind words tonight. Let's walk about it. Thank you as well. Thank you for being here. Yes. Let me see here.
You can scroll up in the chat.
I'm trying to scroll up here.
There's the little button there.
Yes. Thank you, baby. I agree with Brother Ray. They're responding to each other.
Yeah, they're kind of having a little conversation there, but I know there might be some questions.
So what were Miss Suzanne Hartman? She asks, well, what were the 13 years of Joseph in jail a parallel for in Jesus' life? I honestly don't know.
I don't think that every single thing that happened to Joseph was meant to be, okay, let's look for somewhere in Jesus' life that happened. I don't think that's the way prophetic foreshadowing works at all, where every single detail is, significant of something later. Sometimes there are just, details that are part of the story that we're told about that don't necessarily have a parallel to Yeshua. I think we get enough parallels between Joseph and Yeshua.
That's right.
That, we need not worry if we don't necessarily know what the time in jail was about.
Miss Ginger Dollins, thank you so much for your love and your support for us. We really appreciate you. You've been a blessing to us. And who else are we seeing in here?
We got Steffi Foltz in there. Hello, Steffi.
August, thank you as always for supporting us and being loving and kind with your words to us.
Cece, I'm sure Cece's in there. Yeah. I know I saw Cece at the very beginning of the chat. Hey, sister, love you.
But otherwise, do you see any other questions in there?
I don't see any questions in the last little bit. Maybe if we scroll all the way down, there might be something that popped in. Aw, bless your heart.
Why are the veils associated with harlotry? Yeah, we actually talked about that. August is asking, why are the veils associated with harlotry with Rebecca when Rebecca wore one?
Okay, Tamar covered her face.
Yeah.
So a veil isn't always a facial covering. It is a head covering.
Yeah.
So there appears to be a difference in just a normal head covering where you can see the face and a veil that covers the face completely, which is interesting that you see that in, a lot of Islamic countries where that's actually mandated for the women to wear it's called the niqab and also a burqa, but where it's basically like a pillowcase with a slit in it, for the eyes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that back in that time, it sounds like that was the garb of a prostitute.
He didn't recognize Tamar at all.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a veil over her
Miranda.
hair. Oh yeah. Hello, Miranda. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
But yeah.
So it was definitely concealed her entire identity.
Yeah.
So therefore it's not just a veil. It's a covering, completely covering, which, that's.
I don't want to get into the details, but we gave our disclaimer.
Clearly,
everybody knows there's some adult themes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clearly this is something that was a practice back then that the men knew what to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The men knew this is what happens. This is the way things go down. The women knew how things went down. And yeah, it's a little, whereas a veil can be, or heads covering, I should say. And I guess it really depends on how we're defining these terms.
Right.
As far as the type of garments that we're talking about. But that can be very beautiful in a woman. I don't think that the Father encourages anywhere in Scripture to cover a woman's face.
Right.
Yeah, that's totally different. Just the idea of possibly a head covering if you're actually in the temple because of what's going on. But that's even up for debate. We might do a separate episode later.
As someone who covers, I can say I've studied it out. We only see Paul talking about it.
That's right.
And he's admonishing them that the women, that it's good for them to cover when they pray or prophesy. It's good for them to have their head covered. A lot of us women who do cover, it's a personal conviction thing. We don't teach others that it's a commandment or anything like that. But most of us feel like, if we're supposed to pray without ceasing, a lot of us feel inspired, to cover partly from that. But I think that in this particular passage, it makes it clear that she covered her face. Yeah. So we don't see the Father anywhere encouraging the women of God to cover their face. And here in this particular situation, we see it specifically mentioned that she disguised herself as a temple prostitute by covering her face.
That's right. So
it makes it pretty clear, what, that kind of a veil, that kind of a covering signified for people.
Susanna Hartman makes an interesting statement about this. Right. She says, if the temple prostitute was a stand-in for a goddess, then covering the individual person's identity would make sense. Remember, we were doing our study, and I actually suggested possibly they covered their whole identity because you didn't want. Well, here, let me. So I'm going to say two statements. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we suggested was covering the identity of the woman was possibly needed because it was somebody's daughter.
Yeah.
These are smaller communities back then. Mm-hmm. Somebody may have known who this was, mm-hmm. right? And then, but you also run into this problem that you have with Judah and Tamar. It was his own daughter, and so that worked to another effect in that regard. But yeah, to her question, Suzanne, to your idea, Very possibly.
Yeah.
Right? Because this whole concept in a very perverted way of the occult is definitely all wrapped around sexual fornication and different things like that, which is why we have, some of the initial, instructions by the disciples about converting Gentiles to come into covenant was, keep them away from these occultic practices and from fornication and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I mean, really, if you're going to the temple to do something like that for the worship of your gods, it wasn't a personal thing. It wasn't an intimate, it didn't matter.
You're not fostering a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to know who it is, because it's just about the magical aspect of it. It's just about, the ritual of it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, how sad.
Sad.
So sad.
Because we'll get to many questions there, but thank you guys so much. Unless I don't see any other questions here, but we really appreciate you guys watching. And
amen, Ken. That's what I'm always looking forward to. Every time people are debating things, I always say, in the kingdom, we're going to meet and we'll see each other at the resurrection, and we're all just going to chuckle over how much time we spent bickering over little things that just didn't matter, that we weren't going to be able to figure out until we got to the kingdom anyways. Yeah,
that's why, we may have differing opinions on very minute details in scripture, but the big essentials, those, we most people stand in faith and agreement on. Yeah. So let that be our unification, so to speak, as a brotherhood and faith and sisterhood in the faith. There's a famous saying about that, about talking about when it comes to believers and how they're communicating with each other, right? It says if I can get it right, it says in the essentials, unity, in the non-essentials, liberty, but in all things, love. Yeah. So just a fun little, philosophical guideline for how we interact with each other when it comes to discussing scripture and sharpening through scripture and everything, that we may not agree on every single minute point, but that's okay. We don't have to let it become a point of contention to where a relationship has to be severed or boundaries have to be put up because someone can't control themselves. Right.
Or a denomination needs to be started. So
anything else, sweetie, that in conclusion, we just want to pray before we end tonight, guys. Yeah. Well,
same as always, I want to, if everyone who's still here, thanks for watching all the way through. We love you guys. We really appreciate you. I want to remind everybody that our heart here is for everyone to be able to comprehend the word so that they can teach it to others and effectively deal with any objections that they receive, any questions. Like Sean said earlier, we want you to be able to, tell others about this on your own without having to get on your phone and say, hey, how can I explain this to somebody? Yeah. And the way to do that is by keeping everything in context, because context creates comprehension. And, if you haven't found us on Facebook yet, come look for us. He's Sean, S-E-A-N. I'm Lindsay, L-E-N-D-S-E-Y, Griffins. And we just really appreciate you guys. And I'll let my lovely husband take us out with prayer. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, guys. All right. Father, we love you. We thank you for everyone here that's joining us tonight. It's want to learn your word. We just give you praise for allowing us the opportunity to do this. And we ask that your spirit just use these words, water them, nurture them within our hearts and minds over the week, that they may become fruitful and productive in our life and interaction with our family, friends, and strangers, showing them your glory, pointing them to your Messiah and his love and his example for us, that we may walk as disciples to him, so that we keep our eye on the gospel of the kingdom of God, which is this idea that our Messiah will bring us into the land of promise. He will give us everything that you promised us throughout this entire book, our place of rest, our eternal Shabbat, really. So we give you praise. We thank you for all of your words, and we thank you for your love. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We hope to see you guys here again next week. We love you guys. We thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, guys.